What's the dumbest reply to a serious question you've heard? Story 1, it was actually me who said the dumb reply. This was when I was younger. Just by the way, texted to me by a friend, can I take a rain check? A few minutes later, I text back, nope, no rain. I had literally checked the weather for the day. I was a socially awkward idiot. So, edit yes, I realized everything is when I was younger. Specifically, this happened about 2 years ago. And yes, I'm still a socially awkward idiot. I was just more of one back then. Story 2, in physics, there's something called the right-hand rule, which helps you find the direction of force given the direction of the magnetic and electric fields. It's a little hard to explain how exactly, but you literally use your right hand as a model. My professor asked me in front of the class what the first thing you needed to identify in order to use the rule was. I panicked and answered your right hand. Story 3, I was on a job, and we needed to have a structural engineer to come in and look at one of the floors to make sure it was stable enough. So we asked the owner's daughter, who was supposedly a business major who was going to take over her dad's company, if she had a contact number for the structural engineer her dad normally dealt with when having his buildings renovated. She looks at the three of us, me, my assistant superintendent and project manager, and goes, oh yeah, but he's busy working on my car at the moment. All three of us. What? Yeah, he's working on my engine in my car. Why do you guys need him? Engineers work on engines, not buildings. WTF? Story 4, I got a former friend a job at my workplace. She was seriously stressing, talking about how if she doesn't find a job, her ex might win the custody case and take the kids. And she wasn't finding anything, so I talked to my boss and got her position doing what I do. 1 week later, she was supposed to go on her first call. She overslept by 4 hours and ended up missing the job. I called her as I was leaving to do the job she missed. I asked, so, are you going to talk to our boss and see if he'll give you another chance? She straight up went, I don't think so. Oh, well, it wasn't meant to be, girl. What? So I know I work in the funeral business. The job was taking a body down to get an autopsy. The place where this particular person was getting one was over 2 hours away. We're supposed to be there at a certain time. Otherwise, we spend all day there, edit this girl, and are no longer friends. Stupidly of me. The job wasn't what led me to sever ties. Along with not working, this girl had constant car troubles at the time of the job. She had a working vehicle. I let her use my car because I bought a new one and planned to sell the old one. We worked out a deal where she would babysit my 4-year-old in exchange for using my car to get her kids back and forth to school. A month into that, she can't babysit for me anymore and wasn't paying me to use my car. I repeatedly asked for my car back over the span of 3 months, and she'd give me some kind of excuse every time. I ended up having to go over to her apartment, demand my keys, and then go back to get my car later. Last I heard, she still has her kids and was recently let go from a fast food restaurant for missing too many shifts. Story 5, in law school, we had a free clinic for qualifying and lower-income people to come in. We couldn't technically advise them because we weren't barred yet, but we could guide and try to help them through some complex issues they might not have a handle on. One guy came in and wasn't even my case, but being done by a classmate next to me during session. The man, dead-faced and scared with filing for bankruptcy, ruined my life. Girl, fluster how to answer well, it looks like your life is already pretty bad. Story 6, at the start of 2020, a volcano erupted in Batangas, a province in the Philippines, affected my hometown, which sucked. What does our president suggest doing against the eruption? Give supplies, help in the evacuation of the people stuck there, provide relief and support? No. You want to know the answer? His words, not mine. I will urinate on the volcano. Good job, President. Story 7, back in India. My company had hired a motivational speaker to give a speech and event. There were 300-odd people with senior people of HR also in audience. Everyone was bored, but the lady instructor kept on going on how to build self-confidence. Sensing that people are not interested, she started getting audience involved. I, being a backbencher as always, did not care about it at all. I thought she would stay in front. I was feeling sleepy and not paying any attention to it. After some time, I saw her coming to the back. She suddenly stopped next to me and asked me, are you motivated? I was not sure what was going on. I answered, no, I am. Dave, half of the crowd started laughing. She was taken aback by my answer and did not know how to respond to this. She did not come to the back to ask questions after that. Story 8, I was a nanny when I was in college for this very bizarre family who always pretended like I wasn't there. I was walking down the street with the mother and her 2 kids. It was February and the sun glare was really bad, so naturally I was wearing sunglasses. One of the kids, about 4, asked his mother why I was wearing sunglasses in winter, and the mother responds, well, some people are not that smart, and they just want to look cool. Please note, both parents were professors at an Ivy League college. Story 9, in school, a physics teacher had asked one of my fellow students, who was holding a presentation on nuclear energy, what is the Hadron Collider in Switzerland used for? The response was so outrageously stupid, I was dumbfounded and cannot believe this happened to this day. She also wasn't joking. Nobody jokes with this teacher, because no one had ever seen him laugh, and he was to create a second sun. Story 10, my friend was a second-year med student, and she was walking through the main floor of our hospital in scrubs, stopped by a passerby asking for directions. She was asked, "Hey, where's the PET CT?" She said, I think there's one in a nearby mall." The man looked at her confused and was like, "The PET CT is in the mall." She replies, "You like the second floor, I think. It's not called Pet City, though. It's called Pet World, I think, do you think I'm looking for a pet store?" 2 years of medical education and common sense returned to her in that moment and said, "Oh my God, no, you mean the scan. It's down that hall on the right." So sorry. He shook his head, walking away, and we heard him say, "I wish I was looking for a pet store." Story 11, at work, a customer asked one of our chefs where the fish comes from. He pointed to the kitchen and said it just comes through that door. I'm editing, so I don't have to reply to all. This guy is the kind of guy who wouldn't think to make a joke like that. He has an absolute heart of gold, but unfortunately, he is actually that thick. I once got asked by him if a pot of obviously boiling water was hot, and had to stop him from just dipping his hand in there when my sarcastic answer was to dip his finger in and check, "Oh, and also, thank for the silver." Story 12, we were discussing about Antarctica, and some guy casually said, "Stone cold face, you don't actually believe Antarctica is a real place, right?" Edit some PPL think it was a joke. I assure you it wasn't. Story 13, doctor to mom, "Are you vaccinating your son?" "About 1 year, according to the chart I gave you." "Mom, better than that. I am breastfeeding him." "This was in India last year. Didn't know this was happening in India too." Story 14, when accused of nepotism after giving his son an important role as a politician, Brazil's president said, "He has to be someone's son. Why can't it be mine?" Truly an argument you can't fight back. Story 15, in a high school world history class. Teacher, "All right, everyone, we'll be covering the Reformation period. Who knows why Martin Luther was significant?" Student, blurting out without raising hand, "Martin Luther isn't that the guy who freed all the slaves?" This one holds a special place for me because it is multiple layers of wrong. Story 16, asked my ex-boss alcoholist POS if he knew how to do X thing on the system and could show me. He replied with yes and went home. Just a yes and left. Story 17, was in college and went to the calculus study hall to see if I could learn something. One of the problems was something like a man throws a ball on the moon at a speed of XXX mph at an angle of YY degrees. How long before the ball comes down to response from the TA PhD candidate in math? That's a stupid question. Everyone knows there's no gravity on the moon. I never went back. Story 18, one time my friends and I were hanging out in his apartment. All of a sudden, I hear a whoosh and look over at my friend, and his hair is on fire. We get out quickly, and I asked him what had just happened. He told me I was trying to listen to the sound the lighter made when I flicked it. Story 19, in 11th grade English class. What is a syllable? Heard at a Chinese takeout restaurant. Is the orange chicken. Best part, she was dead serious. Story 20, in my high school physics class, the teacher asked, "What was the unit for time?" This girl screamed, "Kilograms." After that, you could see the teacher lost hope on all of us. Story 21, hope this story fits here. I helped a friend, Bob, get hired working in the back room of a retail store. I was good friend with the manager, Tim, and I would periodically check in to see how Bob was doing. I was a manager as well at the time at a different location. Tim was very pleased with Bob's work ethic and productivity. I talked to Bob, and he said he was enjoying the job. After about 5 or 6 months, I got a call from Tim asking if I've talked to Bob recently. I replied no, and asked if everything is okay. Tim informed me that Bob has been a no-call, no-show for about a week, and he was worried about him. I immediately called Bob to see what was going on. Bob informs me that he decided to quit the job. In utter dismay and confusion, I shout, "What? Why? I vouch for you. Why would you do that without at least giving me a heads up?" He replied, "Man, every time someone new gets hired, they put them with me to train them, and that's not my job." Technically, he was right. It wasn't his job to train new hires, but what Bob didn't know is managers did things like this to groom the associate into becoming a supervisor, gradually giving them more responsibilities over time. They did the same thing with me when I was coming up the ranks. He would have known this if he had called me before he decided to quit. Once I explained I could hear the wires connecting in his brain, he apologized and asked if he could get his job back. I told him probably not since he left the way he did. Just because it's not your job now doesn't mean it won't be your job in the future. Story 22, I used to work a video rental store that has since closed down. First week I worked there, a person asked it in store, mind you, if we rented out movies. I didn't know what to do, other than just with a stone-faced, and said, "Yes, of course we do." I wasn't sure if they were serious or not. Story 23, a middle school music teacher asked the class why it's called a quarter note. One kid, quite seriously, replied, "Because they're worth 25 cents each." Story 24, astronomer here. Maybe not quite what Opie had in mind, but it is depressing how many people will ask me a serious question about, say, black holes, head the explanation, and then dismiss it with a "yeah, but I don't believe in relativity," or whatever theory they dislike. Like, okay, I guess you can believe in whatever you want, but the universe isn't going to conform to that and how it works. And it goes without saying that these people have very rarely taken an actual physics class and understand what they're dismissing. They've just read some articles online and think they're now experts. Story 25, my high school teacher, and I heard this one once. What's Sudoku? Deadpan serious. Very condescending. It's the highest form of ritualistic Japanese suicide. Story 26, when I was a senior in high school, I was in National Honor Society, and I used to be the lab assistant for Chemistry A and help grade tests. We were going over elements and compounds, and the directions asked the student to clarify if the subject was an element or a compound. The teacher threw in pizza as a gimme question, and this guy literally wrote element as his answer. Even worse, he was irate when we marked incorrect. He was the only one in all 3 classes to get that question wrong. Story 27, full disclosure. I was the idiot in this conversation, but in my early 20s, I was at a friend's small gathering. I was chatting with my friend, and some dude I'd never met before asked where he grew up, and he said DC, to which I replied, oh, I didn't realize people actually live there. I kind of knew it was stupid as it was coming out of my mouth, but I also kind of thought that was a district, like a financial district, and people went there for work, but lived just outside of it. Worst part was that even though I was fresh out of college, I was working in a local political office, and these were folks from state legislative offices, so I should have no better. They laughed at me for a while. Story 28, teacher in high school asked the class if anyone knew how many feet there were in a mile. Very seriously, a student answered nobody knows that. It's impossible, everyone has different sized feet. Story 29, while watching Frozen with a group of friends, my brother's girlfriend, 30 minutes and looks confused and upset and looks me in my eyes and asks if their parents died. Are they still sisters? She had been thinking about it for 30 minutes. I had to console her and let her know that if her parents died, her sister would still be her sister. Story 30 at our 9, grade science fair 9. Grade is the last year before graduation from school. IND Denmark, how IT is in the States. However, our last science exam, one like this, my friend and our teammates, and we had IT going pretty good. So my teacher asked how wind was created, and my friend replied, the tree's muscles make them swing from side to side, pushing air around, thus creating wind. Story 31, it was biology, and the teacher called this guy, I'll call him Tim, to the board to answer a couple questions for a grade. He'll skip to the point. She asked him, how did a horse adapt to his living conditions? He answered with long nose, strong legs, wings, and claws. Don't know if he was thinking about a griffin or a Pegasus, but it was very funny. Story 32, I saw a video of a guy asking people, what's the hardest thing you've had to say in your life? Most people replied with sad things, telling their kids that their dog passed, had a divorce, relative passed, etc. But one guy comes in and says the time he had to say Worcestershire sauce. Sure, it was funny because he kept on saying it wrong, since it was the hardest thing for him to say, but it was such a dumb answer, but still super funny. Story 33, a kid got asked what 2 plus 2 was. He thought for a second and said 7 or 5. This was in 6th grade. I swear to God his age was higher than his IQ. Story 34, I guess this probably doesn't count as it's more of a dumb question. At work one day, I was given a gift from a coworker. It was a bracelet with silver beads. The beads signified the dots and dashes for Morse code. In Morse code, the bracelet design spelled out you. Another girl that we worked with asked me with a straight-face Morse code, is the same thing as sign language right? Another coworker who wasn't exactly bright chimed in and said, yes, that's the exact same thing with the hand signals. I had to leave the room. From a beauty pageant. Sadly, I haven't been able to find a Q. What are your opinions on affirmative action? Well, I believe we should be affirmative in all our actions. That's a question that's unfair to ask of smart people. Story 35Q, if you're traveling 80 miles per hour, how long does it take you to go 80 miles? Well, if I run a mile in about 9 minutes. Video. Story 36, no, so much a question, but my partner's dad is a doctor and also is from India originally, though he's lived in the UK since the 80s. A patient asked if he was worried about Brexit, and he said no. He's from India. It won't really affect him any more than it did before, since India is in Asia. In absolute seriousness, the patient replies no. India must be in Europe. Asia is where China and Japan are. Story 37, well, it was me who answered, but tell me now, how are we going to transport an entire TV that is way bigger than we two combined downstairs without kiling ourselves? Said my brother back when he was 17 and I was 12. To this day, I have no idea why did our parents trust us in Nah to move the TV through stairs. But then my 12 years old self answered in a completely serious voice fast, and ably I almost got pushed downstairs for that. Story 38, at school, I once asked a group, isn't it weird how we always eat chicken eggs, but you never see turkey eggs? Why is that? A girl looked at me like I was a complete moron and replied in a very condescending tone, you turkeys are male chickens, so? Story 39. Back in the day, when fax machines were the pinnacle of office technology, I had a coworker who was standing next to the fax looking distressed. I asked them what the problem was. They responded that they couldn't make a copy of the document because the copier was broken. I said, "Why do you need to make a copy?" They replied, "If this is faxed in, I want to have a copy. It will get transferred through the fax." They actually thought the fax machine was like a transporter in Star Trek. Story 40. Many years ago, I told a lady I was going to send her a Cat5 cable to connect her computer to her home firewall. She said that was unacceptable because her dogs didn't get along with cats. Story 41. Reporter, when asking Trump on March 16th how he'd self-evaluate himself on his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, his response, "I give myself a 10 out of 10 his previous history of managing the U.S. response. For those interested, January 22nd, we have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China. It's going to be just fine. February 2nd, we pretty much shut it down coming in from China. February 24th, the coronavirus is very much under control in the USA stock market. Started to look very good to me. February 25th, CDC and my administration are doing a great job of handling coronavirus. February 25th, I think that's a problem that's going to go away. They have studied it. They know very much. In fact, we're very close to a vaccine. February 26th, the 15 cases in the U.S. within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero. February 26th, we're going very substantially down, not up. February 27th, one day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear. February 28th, we're ordering a lot of supplies. We're ordering a lot of elements that, frankly, we wouldn't be ordering unless it was something like this. But we're ordering a lot of different elements of medical. February 28th, now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. You know that, right? Coronavirus, they're politicizing it. We did one of the great jobs. You say, how's President Trump doing? They go, oh, not good. Not good. They have no clue. They don't have any clue. They can't even count their votes in Iowa. They tried the impeachment hoax. That was on a perfect conversation. They tried anything. They tried it over and over. They've been doing it since you got in. It's all turning. They lost. It's all turning. Think of it. Think of it. And this is their new hoax. March 2nd, you take a solid flu vaccine. You don't think that could have an impact or much of an impact on corona. March 2nd, a lot of things are happening. A lot of very exciting things are happening, and they're happening very rapidly. March 4th, if we have thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that get better just by, sitting around and even going to work, some of them go to work, but they get better. March 5th, I never said people that are feeling sick should go to work. March 5th, the United States has, as of now, only 129 cases and 11 deaths. We're working very hard to keep these numbers as low as possible. March 6th, I think we're doing a really good job in this country at keeping it down, a tremendous job at keeping it down. March 6th, anybody right now, and yesterday, anybody that needs a test gets a test. They're there, and the tests are beautiful. The tests are all perfect, like the letter was perfect. The transcription was perfect, right? This was not as perfect as that, but pretty good. March 6th, I like this stuff. I really get it. People are surprised that I understand it. Every one of these doctors said, how do you know so much about this? Maybe I have a natural ability. Maybe I should have done that instead of running for president. March 6th, I don't need to have the numbers double because of one ship that wasn't our fault. March 8th, we have a perfectly coordinated and fine-tuned plan at the White House for our attack on coronavirus. March 9th, this blind side of the world. March 9th, the fake news media and their partner, the Democrat Party, is doing everything within its semi-considerable power, it used to be greater, to inflame the coronavirus situation, far beyond what the facts would warrant. March 10th, it will go away. Just stay calm, it will go away. March 13th, National Emergency Declaration. March 13th, I don't take responsibility at all. March 15th today is a national day of prayer. God bless everyone. Story 42. Myself. I was crossing the US-Canadian border with friends coming back from a weekend trip to drink. U.S. guard asks where we're coming from. Myself being the driver, I respond Canada. There were some chuckles and ribbing. I maintain it's an appropriate answer. Story 43. Most of these sound like jokes I make, and now I'm wondering if anyone thinks I'm one of them slow lads. If someone asked me what a Sudoku was, I would definitely reply with ritual suicide. Story 44. So I had this really old and sharp-tongued geography teacher during secondary school, middle school, basically, and she had to pick a representative for the class. So she just asked the last year's representative, "Student L, you want to do it again?" He said, "That's an interesting question. They'll get back to you later." My teacher ignored him and said, "Okay, Student L has very kind of volunteer again to be our geography representative for the year again." Story 45. In social studies class a few weeks ago, we were talking about the Holocaust and World War II. Teacher asks, "What was Hitler?" After we had just talked about different kinds of rulers, dictators, presidents, etc., and was looking for the answer, a dictator. Girl raised her hand and says, "I read last night in the textbook that he was a bit anti-Semitic." Whole class goes silent. Story 46. During an evening with my international coworkers, the wife of one of them found out that I was American. I really hate America, she stated. Remaining calm, I asked her to explain. She said their educational system allows the use of capital punishment. I was stunned for a second, but then caught on. You mean corporal punishment, I said. She then got very angry with me and insisted that the American educational system uses capital punishment. Story 47. It was me who was the dummy. My boss veterinarian took our office out for lunch. Told me, a trailer park college student working as a vet tech, to pay for college, that I could order anything I wanted, even a filet mignon. I responded, no thank you, I don't like fish. Story 48. Years ago, I was an intern at an insurance agency. One of their most successful agents passed away, but his wife, 50s, glamorous-looking lady, was helped through testing so that one of the other agents could work on her husband's portfolio, but she was licensed. So one night at a company dinner party, I was serving drinks. I heard someone ask her, so, what is your opinion on mutual funds? She paused for a moment, looked at him funny, and said, everyone should enjoy mutual fund. Story 49. I used to work as a manager and coach, was hiring for a seasonal sales position, and this girl comes in for an interview looking pretty well dressed and eloquent. Halfway into the interview, I ask her what her hobbies are and what she liked to do with her time off. Turned out she was a vegan who mentors new vegans. I asked her if she would be comfortable handling leather products. Her, of course, as long as it doesn't come from animals, I'm totally fine. But most leather come from cows. But it's vegan, right? Apparently, she never knew that you could dye leather all colors. She thought cow leather white and black. She was carrying a Coach bag. Story 50. Due to Canada being a bilingual country, all official correspondence needs to be released in both English and French. To this effect, the government typically retains an agency to do most, if not all, of its translation work. Of course, there are countless requests to process, and so getting a completed translation typically takes a few days. So I gave the task of translating a document to my assistant to process, walked her through the typical procedure of how to request a translation, etc., 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 left her alone with it, and went back to my work. Towards the end of the day, she comes to inform me that the translation is finished. I was stunned. The agency has never returned documents to me so quickly. Did she have the magic touch, a way with words, whatever it was? I was pleased, that is, until I read the document. I'm not fluent in French, but I knew enough to get by. But this was most definitely improperly translated, so I asked her how she got the translation. Oh, well, the document seemed straightforward enough, so I just put it into an online translator. I studied French in high school, and it seems mostly correct. Google Translate. She used Google Translate. She didn't last very long. She got promoted to another department. Story 51. There was this woman on Twitter who forced her cat to be vegan. I commented on her post saying that it's very unhealthy for cats to be vegan because they're carnivores, they're meant to eat meat. The woman answered, dead serious, but what about diabetes? Story 52. The way people are buying all that toilet paper and stuff is referred to as hamstring hamster shopping in Germany. Took me some time to realize they are not actually buying hamsters. Story 53. In history class in middle school, we were supposed to talk about slavery and what we felt about it. I asked a kid, how do you feel about slavery? He said that slavery was an idea created by the government to have sympathy for black people. He goes on to explain how black people would still be in slavery if it ever happened. And me, I feel very strongly about slavery. I literally had to ask the teacher to go to the bathroom before I would have backhand slapped this white boy across the face onto the ground. Story 54. Our class had done homework on the planet solar system. And when the teacher asked someone for a brief outline of what someone had written for Pluto, this was a long time ago, the class genius seriously put his hand up and said, not much is known about this planet. Took a full 2 minutes for the class and teacher to stop laughing. Story 55. Me, musing out loud. My asthma hasn't been an issue for months now. Why is it acting up all of a sudden? My mother, unburdened by reason you should get a breast reduction. It will help with your breathing. Story 56. Some of my coworkers were discussing climate change in the break room one day, and one of my coworkers said, I think all these hurricanes we've been having lately are caused by all these wind turbines they keep building. If you think about it, they're just giant fans blowing air around. It's probably making us have more hurricanes. I didn't even attempt to explain how that's the exact opposite of how a wind turbine works. Story 57. What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now, who are scared? I say that you are a terrible reporter. That's what I say. Donald Trump. Story 58. Preface. My name is Bob. I was telling a coworker of mine how I got the name Bob. My mother made a deal with my father that if he were to show up to my birth that she would agree to naming me Bob, or else she was going to name me Dominic. Did he show up? Story 59. In science junior year of high school, we were supposed to list our sources for a project. This one kid did his project, and when the teacher asked for his sources, he just flipped to the next slide that had Google written on it. I mean, he was technically correct, but he certainly lost points. Story 60 in a class in college. The topic of favorite colors came up. One girl blurted out, "I like fish." I think her brain was trying to process the color salmon, and it malfunctioned. Story 61, when I was in middle school. Our gifted class took a field trip to JP Morgan to learn about the stock market. We were from a small town, 2,000 people, and the trip was to St. Louis, so most of us weren't used to big, fancy buildings. At the time, Missouri was in a frenzy over the new Madrid fall, because some psychic had predicted a major quake coming from it that year. We even began practicing earthquake drills in school. When we walked into the tall, all-glass lobby, my first thought was, this place is a death trap. So when our tour guide, probably an intern in her early 20s, opened the tour up to questions, I asked, "What is the building's plan for if an earthquake hit?" She replied, completely serious, with, "Well, if an earthquake was coming, I'm sure the sky would be dark and ominous, so we would all have time to evacuate." And that was the day I learned that just being an adult and working in a big fancy building doesn't automatically mean you're intelligent. Story 62, my boss told me we needed to gather up all the fire extinguishers at work so security could send them out for their annual testing. What happens if there's a fire while all the extinguishers are gone? We shouldn't have any fires. Story 63 was dating a woman for a few weeks. Everything was going well, and after a romp, she asked me, "Will you give me a pearl necklace?" I replied, "We haven't been dating long enough for me to buy jewelry." She lost her laughing so hard. I think the answer endeared me to her. About an hour later, she got her jewelry. Story 64, isn't Puerto Rico a town in Mexico? You live in Queens, Puerto Rico 2-0, the Spanglish version. How do you not know this already? Guy I worked with at the time I was 18, he was in his 40s. He's asking how much water I drink because I always brought a big bottle to work. Me, I drink about 3 to 4 liters a day and 5 liters when it's really hot. It seriously makes me feel much better than if I just had a glass when I got really thirsty and my doctor told me to drink more water. But I don't trust him. Me, why don't you trust him? If I did everything my doctor told me, till I'd be dead in a week. Story 65, we were teenagers. Best friend's sister is on the phone, giving her friend directions to their house. Bear in mind, the friend is coming from at least 3 towns away and has never been here. Directions given at the Burger King. Take a left, that's it. What? We had a difficult time explaining to the sister that said directions had a good 15 to 20 turns, and she gave her friend only turn 7. Story 66, a girl moved to my school from Germany. This year speaks perfect English, though, and is late to my social studies class almost every day. One day my teacher asked, "Where are you coming from?" And she goes, "Germany," and the whole class kind of just sat there. Story 67, I used to work in a garden center, and one of the staff had a few screws loose. A customer asked if we had sod in stock, and she said yes. Customer asked, "Is it bluegrass?" She confidently answered, "No, I believe it's green." Story 68, my own. Had a leasing agent at an apartment complex coming on to me. After I had lived there a while, she was a flirt. One day, I went to the office and she feigned reading a Cosmo, then looked at me and said, "How long do you think you have to know someone before having with them?" Me, stunned silence and exit. What I should have said was, "How long have we known each other?" Story 69, we had to do a utopian society project in my English class a couple years back. The teacher asked this girl what her currency was, to which she responded, "Plastic, so we don't waste trees on paper currency." I didn't know whether to ask if she knew that U.S. currency is made from cotton or if she knew plastic was made from trees. Story 70, I work in a customer service call center, and I have to troubleshoot a lot to help customers. Every single day, multiple times a day. "Can you please let me know what web browser you're using?" The Internet Explorer. Me, that's the issue. Internet Explorer is no longer supported and does not work properly with most websites. Then works with other sites I use. They'll just go find a different product. Disconnects. This irritates the out of me. Story 71, I am on a village board. How can we reduce expenses overall in the fire department? Lady stands up and boldly and proudly states, "We could start by filling our own fire hydrants." What? I saw a neighboring town filling our hydrants with their water truck when we have our own water truck, ma'am. Was that last week? We had a grass fire and neighboring town was assisting us. They were filling their truck from our hydrants to continue assisting us. Never mind. Story 72, I once told my friend he should quit smoking. He instantly replied he's not a quitter. You could tell he realized his dumb reply by his face expression. Story 73, when I was in 4th grade, a kid in my class got asked to go up to the board and answer the question. This kid was one of the popular kids, and he was the class clown. The question was, what was President Lincoln's first name? He looked at the teacher and went, "That's the easiest question ever," and proceeded to write the word president on the board. We all thought he was joking, including the teacher, until he put that same answer on the quiz. He failed the quiz, obviously, and the teacher walked to him and loudly went, "You need to retake this. President Lincoln's name is not president that day." All of his friends dropped him, and his girlfriend broke up with him. I still pity him to this day.